Hello, and welcome to the 11th Annual National Webinar on Child Outcomes Data, presented by the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center and Center for IDEA Early Childhood Data Systems. This webinar presents data from federal fiscal year 2019, which states submitted in their 2021 annual performance reports. As in years past, this webinar will show highlights from our analysis of the data that states submitted in their annual performance reports for child outcomes. The indicators used in the analyses were Indicator 3 for the Part C infant and toddler programs and Indicator 7 for the Part B Section 619 preschool programs. In this webinar, you will learn about findings from our analysis of the Part C and Part B child outcomes indicators, where to find more information about the analysis, and where to find resources to help you use the outcomes data at the state and local levels. In this webinar, we present the child outcomes data that states collected from around July 1 of 2019 through June 30th of 2020, and which was reported in 2021. As you may know, states first began collecting, analyzing, and reporting outcomes data in 2005. It was at that time that the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, shifted its monitoring focus from compliance to results. They found that just monitoring for compliance to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, requirements had not always resulted in better outcomes for children with disabilities and their families. At the same time, the Federal Office of Management and Budget, OMB, began to hold all federal agencies accountable for results, and required all federal agencies to report data that show the extent to which their programs make a difference. If the agencies are unable to show positive results, they risk funding cuts. That's why OSEP needs these data, to justify funding for Part C and Part B services. In addition to justifying federal funding for OSEP, for Part C, outcomes data reporting is part of the OSEP results-driven accountability process. OSEP worked with the Early Childhood Outcomes Center to engage stakeholders in identifying which outcomes should be measured. Stakeholders determined that the outcomes to be measured should be functional in nature and integrated across areas of development. Their work resulted in these three targeted outcomes. Number 1, children should have positive social-emotional skills, including social relationships. Number 2, children should acquire and use knowledge and skills, including early language and communication, and for preschoolers, early literacy. And number 3, children should use appropriate behaviors to meet their needs. Along with articulating the outcomes themselves, OSEP also worked with the Early Childhood Outcomes Center and other assessment experts to determine how programs must show progress. Because of the complexity of children, families, areas of disability, and service systems, it was clear that OSEP must ask more than a yes or no question about whether children made progress as a result of services they received in a Part C or Part B 619 program. Experts said that children might demonstrate several different levels of progress, depending on the trajectory of their development. They concluded with these 5 progress categories. Category A represents some children who do not show improved functioning between program entry and exit, as illustrated by the light green line labeled A on the graph. Category B represents children who demonstrate some improvement in functioning, although without changing their developmental trajectory. See the blue line on the graph labeled B. Category C represents children who improve functioning to the extent that they move closer to age-expected functioning, but without catching up. See the dark green line labeled C. Category D represents children who improve functioning to the extent that they do catch up with their same-aged peers by the time they exit the program. See the orange D line. And finally, Category E represents children who maintain age-expected functioning from program entry to exit. This would be the purple line labeled E. Sometimes people ask how children who are eligible for services can enter a program with age-expected skills, as denoted by Category E. The children reported in Category E are those whose developmental issues affect just 1 or 2 outcome areas, not all 3. These can also be children for whom services mean maintaining use of assistive technology to support age-expected development. Once stakeholders had defined 3 outcomes at 5 levels of progress, stakeholders were re-engaged to identify a succinct metric to summarize the data. The stakeholder process yielded these two summary statements. Summary Statement 1 is the percent of children who moved closer to age-expected functioning while in the program. We calculate the percentage of Summary Statement 1 by adding the number of children in progress categories C and D divided by the total number of children in categories A, B, C, and D. Summary Statement 2 is the percent of children who exited the program functioning like their same-age peers. We calculate the percentage for Summary Statement 2 by adding the number of children in categories D and E divided by those in all progress categories A, B, C, D, and E. Since 2005, states have measured child outcomes using multiple approaches. For the purposes of describing the national outcome system, we group these approaches into 4 categories. The Child Outcome Summary, or COS process, is a consensus team rating process based on multiple sources of information about a child's functional performance. This is the most frequently used methodology across both Part C and Part B preschool programs. States that are listed as using one tool statewide are those that require a single assessment tool for all children in the state. For example, in California, all preschoolers with IEPs are assessed on the Desired Results Developmental Profile. Also included in this category are states that use the Patel Developmental Inventory to collect their outcomes data. This is the second most frequently used approach for both Part C and 619. States that are listed as using the publisher's online system are those that enter item-level data into online assessment platforms like those of the Teaching Strategies Gold Assessment or the AEPSI assessment. Item-level data from these systems are combined and analyzed using algorithms designed and maintained by the assessment publishers. This score conversion results in the progress categories and summary statements necessary for the federal reporting. States that are listed as other include those using multiple tools and those using rating processes like the COS, but with different scales. Let's look at how we calculated the national estimate. To determine which states were included in the national estimate, we started by asking 2 fundamental questions about data quality. Number 1, did the data include an adequate number of children? And number 2, did the data stay within expected patterns? To determine the national picture, we calculate the national estimate of the outcomes of children exiting Part C and 619 using a weighted average of state data limited to states that meet our data quality criteria. Please note that the criteria used to identify states to include in the national estimate represent basic criteria for data quality, and they are not sufficient to determine that the data are valid and reliable for all purposes. We define criteria for data completeness and validity. Data from Part C programs are included in the national estimate when at least 28% of Part C exiters from a state's child count are reported in the outcomes data. Data from Part B preschool programs are complete when at least 12% of their count of the children ages 3 through 5 is reported in the outcomes data. We set these 2 criteria very low because the goal is to exclude states with so much missing data that we cannot trust the validity of the performance data. Data from both Part C and Part B preschool programs are considered valid when progress category A, those making no progress, is less than 10%, and progress category E, those who maintained age-expected functioning, is less than 65%. We do not include data on states that use sampling methodologies for child outcomes. We exclude these states because we don't have a method for estimating completeness of their data. Let's take a closer look at why certain states were excluded from the national estimate. This table here shows how many states were excluded from the 2019 national analysis for various reasons. We started with all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. For Part C, 2 states were excluded in FFY 2019 because they used a sampling method. 2 other states reported outcomes data on fewer than 28% of the children who exited Part C, and 1 state was excluded for unusual patterns of data in the A and E progress categories for Part C. This left 46 states for inclusion in the national analysis for Part C. Now let's look at Part B 619. In FFY 2019, 3 states were excluded because they used a sampling method. and only one state was excluded because they reported fewer than 12% of their preschool-age child count. 5 states were excluded for unusual patterns in progress categories A and E. This left 40 states for inclusion in the national analysis for Part B 619. Now let's look at the trends for inclusion in the national analysis. For FFY 2019, 46 states met the data quality criteria for Part C, and 40 states met the criteria for Part B preschool. The green line on this graph compares the number of states that met criteria for Part C across the past 12 years. You can see that the number of states has stayed relatively stable over the last few years, with only one state fewer meeting the criteria this year compared to last year. The blue line shows the number of states that met data quality criteria for Part B preschool. Although the number of Part B preschool programs decreased slightly in 2018-19, it remained stable in 2019-20. We take a closer look at the reasons for excluding data from the national estimate in the next slide. Here are the national estimates for child outcomes data based on the criteria discussed earlier. Starting with Part C, Summary Statement 1, in the area of social relationships, we see that 64% of children substantially increased their rate of growth by program exit. For knowledge and skills, it was 69%, and for taking action to meet needs, it was 71%. Now let's look at Part C, Summary Statement 2. 52% of children in Part C were functioning within age expectations in social relationships by the time they exited the program. Knowledge and skills, it was 44%, and for taking action to meet needs, it was 54%. Moving over to Part B preschool, we see that 81% of exiting children substantially increased their rate of growth in the area of social relationships, 82% for knowledge and skills, and 81% for taking action to meet needs. And finally, for Summary Statement 2 for Part B preschool, the percentage of children functioning within age expectations by the time they exited the program was 56% in the area of social relationships, 53% for knowledge and skills, and 62% for taking action to meet needs. We can see a fuller picture by looking at the data over time. This slide shows the trends in child outcomes across the last 8 years for infants and toddlers exiting Part C programs. The lowest percentage of children making greater than expected growth has consistently been in the outcome of social relationships. That's represented by the green line in the chart on the left. The lowest percentage of children exiting at age expectations has consistently been in the outcome of knowledge and skills, represented by the orange line in the chart on the right. We see a decline in performance across all outcomes and summary statements between FFY 2018 and FFY 2019. The difference between the 3 outcome areas has also narrowed. Now let's look at the trends for Part B 619 preschool programs. This slide shows the trends in child outcomes across the last 8 years for children exiting Part B preschool programs. The percentage of children who make greater than expected growth while in Part B preschool has been very stable and similar across all outcomes over the last 4 years, as seen in the chart on the left. Now look at the percent of children exiting at or above age expectations in the chart on the right. For this summary statement, we see that there has been a decline in all outcomes since FFY 2017. States reported several key reasons for declines in Part C and 619 performance, including changes to state data collection methods, data quality issues, and potential impacts of COVID-19. Further analyses are needed to understand these trends. Next, we will look at the variation across states in the completeness of their child outcomes data for Part C and Part B 619. As mentioned previously, the national estimates take into consideration the completeness of each state's data. This slide shows the range of completeness for Part C child outcomes data. We calculate completeness by dividing the total number of children in the outcomes data set by the total number of children who exited Part C in the previous reporting year. We include states in the national estimate that report at least 28% of the total exiters. For FFY 2019, completeness ranged from 19% to 88%, with a median of 63% and a mode of 66%. This chart shows the variation in completeness for states' Part B 619 preschool programs. For preschool, we calculate completeness by dividing the total number of children reported in the outcomes data by the total number of children ages 3 to 5 in the Part B child count. We include states in the national analysis that report child outcomes data on at least 12% of their child count. For FFY 2019, completeness ranged from 0% to 99%, with a median of 32% and a mode of 30%. Note that one state reported no child outcomes data, and another state did not report their age 3 to 5 child count, and therefore they are not included in this chart. Across all summary statements and outcome areas, we see important variation across states. In this next section, we will highlight variation across states using one summary statement for Part C and Part B 619 as an example, and illustrate one way to analyze and interpret child outcomes data. As we saw earlier, the national data have remained fairly steady over time, with trends up or down just a few percentage points from year to year. However, there is a lot of variation in performance across states. Here we highlight the Part C data for Summary Statement 2 in the outcome area of acquiring and using knowledge and skills. Notice the wide range of percentages states reported for children who exited within age expectations in this outcome area, from 11% to 71%, with a median of 45%. The data were bimodal, with 4 states reporting that 45% of children and 4 states reporting that 53% of children exited within age expectations in the area of knowledge and skills. Now let's look at the same outcome area and summary statement for the Part B preschool programs. Again, we see a wide range across states from 14% to 76%, with a median of 48%. The data were also bimodal, with 5 states reporting 40% of children and 5 states reporting 48% of children exiting within age expectations in the area of knowledge and skills. 1 state did not report data, and 1 state reported less than 10 children. Neither state is included in this chart. In short, we see significant variation across states in these outcomes for young children. What could this mean? Let's discuss one possible explanation using the theoretical example on this slide. Notice the difference between State 1 and State 2 in the percentage of children who exited within age expectations. Why might State 1 have a greater proportion of their children reaching age expectations? One explanation may be that State 1 serves a higher percentage of their overall population in this age group than State 2. States that serve higher percentages of their population are usually serving proportionately more children with milder delays or disabilities. It stands to reason that children with milder delays or disabilities are more likely to exit within age expectations, compared with children who have more severe delays or disabilities. In the next slide, we will look more closely at the differences in child outcomes across states by percentage of their overall population served in order to unpack this theory. Here, we categorized states into 3 groups according to the proportion of their overall population ages 0 to 3 served in Part C in order to determine whether there were differences. This slide shows results for children who exited Part C within age expectations. The green bars represent the 6 states that served fewer than 2.5% of their overall infant and toddler population. Purple bars represent the 28 states that served between 2.5 and 3.9% of their infant-toddler population, and the blue bars represent the 17 states that served greater than 3.9% of their overall infant and toddler population. The data pattern is as we would expect for all 3 outcome areas, meaning that states that served proportionally fewer children reported lower percentages of children exiting within age expectations. This is especially clear when you compare the states in the green bar with the states in the blue bar. This supports the theory we presented in the previous slide about states serving relatively more children with milder delays or disabilities. Now let's see if this same pattern holds true for Part B preschool programs. The green bars represent the 13 states that served fewer than 5.7% of their preschool age population. Purple bars represent the 17 states that served between 5.7 and 7.5% of their preschool age population, and the blue bars represent the 18 states that served greater than 7.5% of their preschool age population. Across all 3 outcomes, the percentage of children exiting within age expectations shows very little difference based on the percentage of the overall preschool age population served. In fact, within the outcome areas of social relationships and action to meet needs, Results only vary by about 1 to 2 percentage points across the three groups. And in the area of knowledge and skills, the summary statement percentage is highest among the states serving between 5.7 and 7.5% of their overall preschool age population. In short, the Part B 619 results do not follow the expected pattern we saw within Part C. We do not currently have an alternative hypothesis to explain this pattern for 619, but states may wish to use other data available to them in order to dig deeper. Note that 3 states were excluded from this chart. One state was excluded because they reported data on only 5 children, another because they did not report outcomes data, and one other because they did not report their age 3 to 5 child count and therefore could not be grouped for the purpose of this chart. To assist states in their ongoing review of child outcomes data, the DaSy Center creates unique child outcomes data reports for each state every year. This report is called the State Child Outcomes Data Quality Profile. This profile will help you review different aspects of data quality for your child outcomes. These reports are sent from the ECTA liaisons to each Part C and Part B 619 coordinator every year when they are completed. If you haven't received a report yet, please reach out to your ECTA or DaSy contact. Let's take a peek inside the child outcomes data quality profiles. Here you see a few examples of charts contained in a state's data quality profile. These reports contain valuable graphics and tables that can be used to identify trends in state performance and data quality issues that may require further exploration. The information can be easily shared with a variety of audiences. For example, charts can be pasted into state documents and presentation materials. Please contact your ECTA or DaSy liaison if you have a question or would just like to chat about your data. Here are some further resources on the ECTA and DaSy Center websites to support your child outcomes measurement work, including a 2-page summary of the 2019 IDEA Child Outcomes Highlights, guidance for setting targets for your child outcomes data, a map of approaches to child outcomes measurement across the country, guidance on how to use your child outcomes data quality profile, and a resource to help stakeholders ask questions to help understand year-to-year changes in child outcomes data. Here are even more resources, including an infographic that delineates the breadth of the 3 child outcomes, a collection of child outcomes summary process professional development resources, and resources for completing remote screening, evaluation, and assessment. A 4th item, COS completion when teams can't meet in person, may be helpful for anyone using teleconferencing, regardless of child outcomes measurement approach. The last item about remote service delivery is not specific to child outcomes measurement, but it provides useful information compiled for states' Part C and Part B 619 programs, including technology and privacy, reimbursement, provider and educator use of technology, family resources, state guidance, and research. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact the DaSy and ECTA staff listed here. For more information about the ECTA and DaSy Centers, please visit our websites at the addresses listed here. This concludes our presentation. Thanks for your interest in child outcomes, and have a great day.